Goblin launch detected.
Hey gang! Using the promo code MTGMUDSTA, all caps, will get you 10% off any order over $10 at Flipside Gaming. It'll also get you 10% off any orders of singles at Multizone. And it'll get you 10% off most products at Original Magic Art, with the exceptions of some paintings. If these fine sites don't have what you're looking for, you can also consider using my affiliate link when ordering from TCGPLAYER. And if you'd like to join the generic Goblin Gang to support this channel, there's a link to my Patreon in the description below. Hey gang, and welcome back. Today's game is a bit of a time capsule one, taking us back to Platinum Star Games. In today's game, Kyle is playing the Ur-Dragon, keeping an unclaimed territory, Ramos, Earthquake, Stomping Grounds, Jungle Shrine, Command Tower, and Ancient Den. Dean is playing Slimefoot, keeping Skyshroud Claim, Maelstrom Pulse, Phyrexian Tower, Homeward Path, Woodland Cemetery, Temple of Malady, and a Forest. Victor is playing Iroas, keeping Disenchant, Faithless Looting, Inspiring Vantage, Clifftop Retreat, Oketra's Monument, and Path to Exile. We have another Dean, one of the owners, playing Gyrus, keeping a Bayou, a Swamp, a Wooded Foothills, Skyshroud Claim, Verdant Catacombs, Fauna Shaman, and Brawn. Dean wins the die roll and starts us off. Dean plays a tapped Temple of Malady, scrying 1. Victor plays an Inspiring Vantage and casts Faithless Looting. He draws 2 and discards 2 before passing. Dean the owner plays a Verdant Catacomb and passes. Kyle plays an Unclaimed Territory, naming Dragons. Dean plays a tapped Overgrown Tomb and passes, while Dean the owner sacrifices his Verdant Catacomb. Victor plays a Plains and passes while owner Dean is shuffling. Dean the owner plays a Bayou and casts Fauna Shaman, which seems like a good fit for a Gyrus. Kyle plays a Command Tower. Dean plays a Homeward Path and taps out for his commander, Slimefoot. Victor plays a Clifftop Retreat, passing turn. Owner Dean plays a Wooded Foothills and passes. Kyle plays an Ancient Den and casts Chromatic Lantern, passing turn. Dean plays a Swamp and casts Skyshroud Claim. He shortcuts, playing out his Golgari Signet before searching for the lands. And just to complicate my life, owner Dean sacrifices his Wooded Foothills to go and find a land as well. Both Deans go to their libraries to find cards with forest types on them. Victor plays a Plains and casts Legion Warboss. Owner Dean responds by tapping his Fauna Shaman and discards Brawn. Victor then moves to combat, making a Goblin token with the Legion Warboss, which he swings at Dean the owner. Dean takes the hit, and then reveals Anger to put to his hand. Dean the owner untaps and draws, playing a Swamp. He casts Skyshroud Claim to find a forest, and his copy of Stomping Grounds, which comes in tapped. Kyle plays a Swamp and taps 4 mana for a Frontier Siege, naming Khans as it enters. He moves through his combat step, gaining 2 green from the siege in his post-combat main phase, and taps the Lantern to help cast Sarkhan's Triumph, tutoring for a dragon card and putting it to hand. He passes to Dean while searching. Dean plays a Forest, and Kyle reveals Lathliss. Dean then taps 7 mana for Sheoldred, and Victor wants to double check what the card does. At the end of turn, Dean the owner discards Anger with the Fauna Shaman to tutor for a creature card, while Victor uses Path to Exile on Sheoldred. Victor plays a Plains, and Dean the owner reveals a Filth to the Fauna Shaman ability. Victor then plays Iroas and goes to combat. He makes another Goblin token and swings 1 Goblin at Kyle, and the rest of his creatures at Dean the owner. The Legion Warboss's Mentor ability triggers, putting a +1/+1 counter onto the Goblin token that's going at Kyle, and Kyle takes 2 while Dean takes 3. Dean the owner plays a Swamp for turn, and he assesses his opponents. He casts Buried Alive in his main phase, and activates the Fauna Shaman at the same time, discarding Filth. This lets him find a good number of creatures to put to his graveyard. He finds a Master of Cruelties, Malignus, and Lord of Extinction. He then finds Virtus from the Fauna Shaman ability and puts it to hand. He then casts his commander for 1 of each color, which has the Hydra come in with 3 +1/+1 counters. His commander also has Haste, Trample, and Swamp Walk because of Anger, Brawn, and Filth in his yard respectively, and he swings his commander at Dean. Gyrus' on-attack trigger lets him bring back the Master of Cruelties tapped and attacking, which, much like Kalia, is a brutally sneaky way to take someone out. And the Master connects first because of First Strike, setting Dean to 1 life, and is then taken out once they move to normal damage, and Gyrus deals 3. Dean the owner then experiences the Quickening after becoming the last Dean standing, and passes through his steps to Kyle's turn, exiling the Master at the end of his combat step. Kyle draws and gains 2 green mana in his main phase thanks to his Siege trigger. He plays a tap Stomping Grounds, and he taps mana to cast Lathliss in his main phase. He then moves through his combat step, playing Pillar of Omens in his second main phase, with the green mana from his Siege again, naming dragons as it enters, and passing. Victor draws and casts Anointed Procession, and then heads to combat, gaining 2 Goblin tokens this time from his Legion War Boss, and the Procession. He goes at Dean with everything, and puts a +1/+1 counter onto one of the Goblin tokens. They all connect with Dean, doing a total of 8 damage, and Victor then passes. Dean plays a Forest for a turn, and casts a Virtus in his main phase. The Partner with ability triggers as the creature enters, and Dean gets to go and find Gorm the Great, revealing him and putting him to hand. Dean then goes to combat, and he swings Gyrus at Kyle, and Virtus at Victor. He gets to exile a creature with Gyrus' on-attack trigger, exiling Malignus. This has Kyle taking 23, 3 of which is commander damage, and Victor then takes 1 from Virtus, and then loses half of his health rounded up. Before leaving the combat step, Dean then exiles Malignus. Kyle draws and counts up his mana. He taps all out to cast the Ur-Dragon, gaining a dragon token as his commander enters, and Lathliss seeing it. He then swings the Lathliss at Dean, which triggers the Ur-Dragon's ability, drawing Kyle a card, and letting him put out a permanent from his hand. He drops Okachi Vengeful Kami, and as the legendary Dragon Spirit enters, Kyle gains another dragon token with the Lathliss trigger. Dean then takes the hit, and Kyle then passes to Victor. Victor draws and plays out a Skull Clamp. He then clamps one of the Goblin tokens that doesn't have a +1/+1 counter on it, drawing 2 cards as it dies. Victor then goes to combat, making 2 Goblin tokens with the War Boss trigger. He then goes swinging all out at Dean, and pumps one of the tokens with a +1/+1 counter. They all connect again, and this time Dean takes 10. In his post-combat main phase, Victor then uses the clamp on one of his new Goblin tokens, drawing 2 cards as it dies. He then casts Soul Ring, and clamps another token, drawing 2. While he's doing this, Dean discards Gorm to the Fauna Shaman to find a creature. Victor then plays one of his newly drawn cards, a Sacred Foundry, which he has come in untapped, and loses 2 life. Victor then passes as he discards down to 7, and Dean still looks for a creature to put to hand. Dean finally reveals a Noxious Gearhulk, and moves to his turn. Dean untaps and draws for turn before tapping 6 mana for Noxious Gearhulk. The Gearhulk enters, and destroys Kyle's Ur-Dragon, gaining Dean 10 life as it does. Dean then evokes a Shriekmaw, whose brief appearance on the battlefield destroys Victor's Legion War Boss before sacrificing itself. He then goes to combat, swinging Virtus at Victor again, and the rest of the team at Kyle. Dean gets a trigger with Gyrus to bring back a creature, and he has the Lord of Extinction come back tapped and attacking. The Lord plus the rest of the creatures at this point is big enough to take Kyle out, and Dean then exiles the Lord at the end of combat and passes turn. At the end of turn, Victor casts Disenchant and takes out the Gearhulk. Victor draws and plays a Temple of the False God. He pays to cast Sunforger and equips it onto a Goblin token. He goes to combat, swinging both tokens at Dean, dealing 8. In his post-combat main phase, Victor activates the Sunforge, detaching it and going to his library for a red-white instant spell that costs 4 or less. He finds Swords to Plowshares and exiles Virtus, gaining Dean 1 life as the creature is exiled. Victor then passes turn. Dean draws and plays a Woodland Cemetery. He casts Golgari's Signet and goes to combat. He swings the Shaman and Gyrus at Victor, exiling Gorm as Gyrus is declared an attacker. They all connect, and this puts Victor to 1. Moving from his combat step, Dean then exiles Gorm and passes turn. Victor draws and plays a Mountain. He casts Sun Titan, bringing back the Hammer of Perforos from his graveyard. With the hammer hitting the field, Iroas becomes active, and the Sun Titan can swing as well because it has haste now, which means the crackback on Dean is now enough to take him out, winning Victor the game. Game review time. So, if you've made it to the end of this game, and I'm sure some of the comments in that video are going to say, basically what Dean was doing was impossible. Unfortunately, Malignus and Lord of Extinction have what are known characteristic-defining abilities, meaning that their star is always something and never 0-0. Knowing this now, about a year after this was filmed, doesn't help the fact, unfortunately, but at the time we thought it worked like this. Had we realized it, I'm sure Dean would have changed his targets when using Buried Alive, and would have found him some better targets. The only person this really unfortunately impacted was Kyle, since the Master of Cruelty's attack with Gyrus was a legal play, and Dean would have gotten taken out that way. What this might have changed was that Kyle would have taken out Dean the owner, and then in turn been taken out by Victor, but we'll never know now. I'm sure unfortunately this spoils the viewing for some people, but I like to think of this as a learning opportunity and helping people realize that you can't actually do this is important. Plus, you can always tune into the next video and hope we don't make any mistakes. Please be sure to tune in every Monday and Thursday at 11 AM Eastern Standard Time for a guaranteed new video. You can also follow me on Twitter at MTGMudsta. You can find me on Facebook at facebook.com/MTGMudsta. And lastly, you can check me out when I stream at twitch.tv/MTGMudsta. This video is brought to you in support by my patrons. If you're looking for a way to help out the channel, please be sure to visit the link below. Thank you all for watching this video, and don't forget, friends are just opponents you haven't eliminated yet.